Hello and welcome to episode 2, creating reusable class libraries for packaging. I hope you've already watched the previous episode. Again, if that's not the case, please make sure you do. In this episode, we are going to split the solution that we created into multiple reusable class library projects. We are going to understand why and when we need to have, modular code. What is modularization? And then we are going to refactor the class library that we created in the previous episode into separate class library projects which are Nuget friendly. And then we are going to prepare one library for packaging. So let's get started. So let's talk a little bit about modularization, which is a very important concept when it comes to creating successful applications. So modular code or modularization is the process of breaking a large system into smaller, independent, manageable parts called modules. So modules is a very overloaded term, right? When you start learning about software development, you encounter this term here and there. So module, you see this word a lot, but just think about think of modules as like small, independent, manageable, self-contained, pieces of code, modules of code. So a large system can be, decomposed into separate kind of modules. So each module focuses on a specific functionality, single responsibility principle, like user authentication, booking, payments. It can be developed, tested, and maintained separately, which is very nice because we can dedicate different people, different resources to each module, and can be reused in other systems. You can cherry pick the different modules that you want to use in different applications. In software terms, modularization means structuring your code base as separate projects or components, like for example, class libraries in .NET. So let's think about class libraries uh, as modules instead of a big solution, right? So each module has its own responsibility, single responsibility principle, well-defined boundaries. So everything is self-contained. They have, well-defined boundaries, and then they have minimal dependencies, meaning that you can, as I said, cherry pick each one of them and reuse them in your projects. Let's talk about a real world example. So the domain is an airline system. Imagine an airline system. So airline core as a class library might contain common types and interfaces. Airline booking as another class library or module might handle flight bookings and the different scenarios associated with booking. Airline notifications, another class library, another module for sending emails, SMS, and so on. Airline payments, another module for processing payments. Each module has a well-defined responsibility, right? Like single responsibility principle at work here. And they have well-defined boundaries, they have minimal dependencies, and I have the freedom of working with each one of them, reusing the ones that I want without having to, make a dependency on one single, let's say monolithic, library. So each module lives in its own folder or project. It can be tested and maintained independently. Think of microservices, right? Very similar to microservices. So in software development, we would like to decompose a big system into smaller modules. So you could, I don't know, call them modules, microservices, and so on. They're independent of one another. They can be developed, tested, maintained independently of one another. They have their own repository. They are self-contained. They have minimal dependencies on one another. You can cherry pick the ones that you want to reuse, so you can reuse them in different applications. Why modularization? So modularizing your solution into feature-specific libraries enables very important things. The first one, as I said, SRP, single responsibility principle. So each module now has clear boundaries and they are focused, right, on one single responsibility or maybe a couple of well-focused, cohesive, and very related responsibilities. You have better testability and maintainability. You can test them independently of one another. You can maintain them. You can, have the versioning and deployment in place, right? Again, independent of each other. You can reuse them across multiple apps or services, and you can easily package them and reuse them, distribute them as Nuget packages. This is something that you achieve after you make your code modular. So now let's go ahead and talk about our application. In this episode, we want to make the code a little bit more modular. So right now we have only one single class library. This is what we produced, what we created in the previous episode. I have already added two, class libraries, so bookings and flights. So this is something that we are going to do. We are going to create two class library projects, one for flights, one for bookings. We are going to have our console application. And inside of these two class libraries, which are using .NET 8, we are going to, move those two classes, those two, flight and booking classes to these different class libraries, dedicated class libraries. We're going to create a folder called entities and then move these two code files to their separate, let's say, separate class libraries. And if we want, we can also go ahead and delete airline.core. I'm gonna keep it. I'm not gonna delete it, but we're not gonna use it anymore. And then we need to add some project references from these two, for these two new class libraries, to these two class libraries from our console application. So we can use the .NET CLI to add a project reference, .NET add the target project reference, and then the name of your referenced project. Or you can of course use Visual Studio by right-clicking and then on your project and add a project reference. So let's go ahead and do that. What I want to do is to, for example, in the booking, right, I am going to copy this code and I am going to paste it here. As I said, I want to create a folder called entities. I'm going to move this file to this folder. The namespace is updated and I am going to rename the file. I'm going to do the same thing for flights. So this flights, paste it here, rename the project, so rename file to flights, and then create this entities folder, move this here, and then I am going to go to my console app, remove this project reference, and add two project references to flights and bookings. And then what I want to do is to go to my to my console app. I don't need this here anymore. I'm going to remove this piece of code and I am going to write the new version of my code. So I am going to create this flight object. And then a booking object, and then writing the information about that booking and that flight. And of course I need to change this to booking and flight and add the using statements to those two namespaces. So let me rebuild the solution. We do not have any errors and we can go ahead and run the project to get the output. Yes, we get the output and we have basically decomposed the airline core into two different separate focused class libraries for now. So we've added the project reference, and what it does is that, yes, of course, using that project reference, you are adding these two project references to your CSproj file for the console app. And then the update that we did to the application. So the summary, we have a more modular code right now, right? So we have kind of created two focus class libraries. We're ready now to package these libraries into Nuget packages. But before we do that, we need to discuss, different things in the next episode. And we kind of know that how modular code and modularity improves reusability, testability, maintainability, development of new modules. So always keep that modular code thing in mind. Always try to write modular code. Again, this is something that we always do in different shapes, in different forms in software development. And that's the end of this episode. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. I'll see you in the next one.